Thank you to thanks everyone for listening. In this presentation, I aim to examine the Turkish government's practice of appointing trustees, which are called kayyums, in the Kurdish cities. That is, the Turkish government is removing elected mayors and appointing these trustees in their place without holding new elections. Now, by briefly presenting the tension between pro-Kurdish mayors and the Turkish state since 1999, I aim to show that this new governmental practice of appointing trustees fundamentally differs from the previous repressive practices against pro-Kurdish mayors. Now, the Turkish state indeed removed mayors before 2016, in some cases arrested them, and pro-Kurdish legal political parties were regularly banned, and its prominent politicians also were banned since 90s, or even actually one can consider since 20s, maybe the foundation of the republic. So, but these new removals have quite novel features that I will try to explain by relating it with the concept of authoritarian neoliberalism. Well, what is new about these removals are back then, when the mayors were removed from their posts, either a new election was held in the city council, which almost always resulted in the election of a new mayor from the same pro-Kurdish political party, or again a member of the same party and also a member of the city council became deputy mayor until the new elections. Now, in these new cases, when the mayors are removed, the central government appoints directly these trustees without holding new elections, any kind of elections, not general elections, neither elections in the city council. And these people, appointed people, keep functioning as mayors until new elections, which is usually more than 4-year term for them. So just very briefly, in order to explain, local government system in Turkey is divided between special provincial administrations and municipalities. So both of these organizations function in the same territory. The figurehead of the special provincial administrations is the governor, which is directly appointed by the president. They represent the president and they are responsible to the president. The figurehead of municipalities is the elected mayor. However, there is a hierarchical relationship between these two types of local governments. In the Article 127 of the Turkish Constitution, it is stated clearly that the central administration has the power of administrative tutelage over the local administrations. And for example, according to local hierarchical order of protocol in Turkey, which is something very important in these old-fashioned countries, the mayor comes after the governor, the MPs from the General Assembly, and the highest ranked military commander in the city. So in any case, the mayor actually isn't a position that holds the same political power as its let's say, correspondence in many countries. Meanwhile, the governor is the chief of all law enforcement forces in the city. Its powers include banning the entrance and exit of people to the city or some districts, declaring curfews, banning all gatherings, deploying the army into the city, which are all actually happened in the Kurdish city in last years. And meanwhile, municipalities usually handle providing public services, such as infrastructure services or a sewer system, water supply system, a whole bunch of public services. However, again, the appointed governors are still responsible for assessment of these public services. So the mayors, in any case, they're subordinated in many different ways to the central government. And recent changes made this situation a lot worse, especially in 2016. The government allowed the Ministry of Internal Affairs to appoint mayors when previous mayors were removed in relation to alleged terrorism charges, which was the legal base of removal of Kurdish mayors and their replacement with trustees without holding any kind of elections or any kind of democratic mechanism. So why I think that this is related to authoritarian neoliberalism? Well, I mean, here I should a bit talk about authoritarian neoliberalism, which is used to account for the post-2007 political situation in certain countries. After the strong economic and political crisis, neoliberal policies needed authoritarian governments in order to garner the necessary consent. So even though neoliberalism always contained authoritarian tendencies, I mean, one can just look at Hayek's praising comments about Pinochet in Chile, and I mean, even that is a strong enough example. But yes, neoliberalism always had these authoritarian tendencies, especially in the so-called third world countries. However, this new situation is okay. I don't know if the screen still works or something happened there, but meanwhile, I mean, in this part, it's not really that important anyways. So basically, what happened is that dominant social groups became less interested in neutralizing resistance and dissent via concessions and compromise, and more about favoring explicit exclusion and marginalization, in the words of Ian Bruff, of subordinate social groups through constitutional and legally engineered self-disempowerment. So the idea here is that contemporary neoliberalism is a governmental strategy which operates on two principles: establishing a disciplinary statecraft which closes off key decision-making processes to popular pressures, public input, and non-partisan auditing mechanisms, and deploying the coercive legal and administrative state apparatus a lot more frequently compared to the previous government. Okay, I think it is back the screen. But okay, so the Turkey is one of the most prominent examples of authoritarian neoliberalism in the recent literature. It is usually in relation to this concept of executive centralization, which comes with adoption of a neoliberal macroeconomic program from the strong authoritarian center. And this center becomes the sole arbiter of social and economic policy. It systematically blocks democratic and popular avenues. It bypasses all kinds of democratic mechanisms. It directly enforces neoliberal policies from the center. So why I think this is happening in Turkey is, briefly speaking, again, Kurdish legal pro-Kurdish political parties has a history of being banned by the Constitutional Court. HADEP, People's Labour Party, founded on June 7, 1990, banned in June 1993 for becoming a focus of illegal political activities and engaging in activities against the indivisible unity of the state with its country and people, which we will see in many other cases. So very briefly, HADEP was founded because some Kurdish members of the Social Democratic Party, CHP, was banned for attending the Kurdish conference in Paris, jointly organized by the Paris-based Freedom Foundation and the Kurdish Institute. So they founded this new political party. The party was banned by the constitution, and they joined this other party, HADEP, Freedom and Democracy Party, which was also banned because its program supposedly sought to undermine the territorial integrity and secular nature of the state. They joined DEP, which was banned on June 16, 1994 on the basically same grounds. Then they joined HADEP, People's Democracy Party. I mean, this pattern will follow all the way. DEHAP, which dissolved itself because of the investigations. DTP, which was banned in 2009 on the grounds that it became a focal point of activities against the state's indivisible integrity, which is authoritarian nation. Okay, this goes on until today. But there is a difference here, not just in the legal level, but also in the political level. The justification always is the protection of the state's integrity, nation's integrity, protecting the states, protecting the unity of the territory, a nationalistic, state-centered discourse. Now, this discourse, after in recent two elections, this will change, and we will actually see less of this discourse and more of a different kind of discourse, which claims that actually these trustees are better for the peoples of this city. They're better for the economy. They draw on foreign investments. They provide better public service because they work with the central administration better. So basically, we will see. I'll mention this towards the end of the presentation, but one never knows if there will be enough time. So just basically, I'm saying when I'll show the examples, we will see that actually the justification will be based on the economic benefits of the trust without mentioning undermining democratic mechanisms. But back then, when HEP first entered the local elections on April 18, 1999, some of its members, as it can be seen, was removed. However, new elections was held in city councils. So same thing happened with DEHAP, actually a little bit similar, because in DEHAP, no one was even removed from their post. With DTP city mayors, there were various mayors removed or arrested. However, starting from these 2014 elections, now in this, firstly, in 2015, there are some cases which are like the previous ones. There are some mayors, for example, the mayor of here, Hakkari, because of declaring actually democratic autonomy in the region, she was arrested. She was replaced by a politician from the same political party. This changed after the alleged coup attempt in July 2016 and the following state of emergency, which gives extraordinary powers to the central government. So after this point, all pro-Kurdish mayors, city mayors at least, except for one, were removed directly, and they were replaced with these trustees, appointed governors of the city. And from that point until the elections in March 2019, these trustees acted as mayors, which is actually odd because, for example, in 2017, there was a referendum. In 2018, there were general elections and presidential elections. So it is obvious that the Turkish government considered that there were sufficient conditions to hold elections in these cities, because there were one referendum, one presidential election, and one general election made during this time of trustees. So it wouldn't be too hard to also hold local elections, temporary local elections in these cities, if the issue was just not trusting the city council members. But we'll see that actually this is not the case. This is not the case because we see an entire different discourse. For example, there was a web page and a Twitter account opened titled oluyor.net, which aimed to present the services of trustees. There was a book of 500 something pages published by the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which was talking about all these economic benefits of trustees, how they are working better with the state, how there is now more investment, local and foreign investment. They are creating jobs, many job opportunities. However, all these claims, the problem here is that these claims subordinate democratic processes to economic improvement. So basically, I mean, irrelevant of the accuracy of these claims, because many of them are simply not true, but even if they were true, creating more job opportunities and drawing foreign investment should not be sufficient reason to bypass all democratic mechanisms, including democratic elections, which is the very basis of even the liberal states, even the previous right-wing governments respected the democratic elections, and they actually based their legitimacy on these elections. Now, what we see is that, and it is accepted by the public actually, what we see here is that the issue is less about the integrity of the state and more about the integrity of these cities to the neoliberal economic system, which is relation to the policies of the Kurdish political movement, which is known as democratic confederalism or democratic autonomy. I will again, I don't think I have much time left. So basically, I'll just say that this project of democratic autonomy occurs, it is an empowerment of local communities and local institutions in order to, at least in the long term, undermine the central states and their powers, which comes from the idea is that nation states was a European invention and it wasn't an adequate form of political organization in Middle Eastern countries. So it was an alternative which bases democratic confederalism. Democratic confederalism was thought of a confederal network of small local democratic autonomous communities. And these policies were actually officially adopted policies of the pro-Kurdish political parties. So when they came to power in these cities, even though legally they are subordinated to the governors, they still promote a lot of policies towards establishing, at least in a cultural sense, at least a culture of autonomy, even though they couldn't establish a legal autonomy, they were trying to establish cultural autonomy and involve the people to the decision-making mechanisms. So the issue, what I claim, and if there are questions, I can talk more about this. It's all, I mean, it always gets really disorganized when I try to make a presentation. But the issue here is that democratic elections are deemed meaningless in Turkey because if the state-appointed governors can work better with the central administration, and this creates a more stable situation, both economically and politically, according to the central government. So this, what is happening in the Kurdish cities, by many it is seen as just old-fashioned nationalist repression of the Kurdish political actors. But I think that it is it is the sign of something bigger that's coming, and it starts in the Kurdish cities because of, I mean, first the policies of democratic autonomy, and second because the Kurdish people are the most precarious, vulnerable among at least the people in Turkey, so it is an easier target. But I think what we will see in the future in Turkey and maybe in many other countries is that the central government will start involving more and more, bypassing the democratic mechanisms of any kind or the long established institutions, and they will justify this by an economist discourse based on neoliberal criteria, which is something that we see in the academy, we see in many different parts. So that is the main argument, and I hope that it wasn't too disorganized. So I'll answer the questions one day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Serhat, for a really, really interesting, informative, rich paper.